Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming. This is tips and tricks for triaging wait line. Thank you so much for listening. And at the end, there will be an opportunity for us to take questions, which you can ask throughout the session in the chat. Next, I of course want to thank you for taking time out of your day. I know that this is a very busy time of year for many of you, so we definitely appreciate you taking an hour to speak to us, to listen to our presentation, and we hope that it's going to be a good use of your time. We're going to provide you with some good tips for managing and triaging your wait lines. We hope the takeaway is that your day-to-day tasks will be a little easier and that you can spend more face-to-face time with students and less time managing your wait lines. We also hope that these tips provide you with ways to help empower students to triage themselves. Not only does this take some of the work off of your shoulders, but as you can guess, it is amazingly helpful for students in the long run. So we definitely want to be able to help you there as higher education professionals ourselves and people who are passionate about student success. We do want to just quickly mention, obviously, if you signed up for this, you were drawn to the title, but you might have heard the phrase triaging before. We hear it a lot from advisors, which is where a lot of the inspiration for this webinar comes from. But we don't hear it from everybody, and it might not be a phrase that's familiar to you in the context of higher education. Most people recognize it as being emergency services or a doctor's office or a hospital. When we say triaging, we mean figuring out who's the priority, who's in the correct line, who is in the wrong line, how do we get them there, how do we alert the other area. So we're taking that concept of prioritizing students, prioritizing patients or other people, and applying it to areas in higher education that have those wait lines. So I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Laura, who's going to introduce us and tell you a little bit more about how we came to this spot.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. Rachel and I are part of the implementation team for the QCampus product here at Engineerica. We come from higher ed. We have spent many, many years in colleges and universities where we focused on helping with student success, internal and external reporting, including grants, and helping with compliance for accreditation. So our backgrounds are there, our degrees are in that, and we bring that over to this company that is focused on helping student success through products that help track, engage, and retain. Our experience with advisors comes in that every time we go to a campus and we're helping the institution reach the goals that they have set, advising and or counseling is at the center. So we're always trying to help advising and counselors get things done, even though they tend to be what we often refer to as the I don't know where else to go. So that's, in our belief, that's why the lines get so long. They're also getting long at certain times of the year, but this is where we're pulling all of our information for you today. We are passionate about you collecting data appropriately and accurately so that you can turn around and use it for internal and external reporting. We really want you to be able, as a whole, at your college or university, to be able to determine if all of this resources that you're investing in for your students is actually having a positive impact on student success. The only way you're going to know if your Learning Commons or your one-stop shop or that you added 5 advisors to your team has actually made a difference is you will need to know which of your students use those services. Okay, so on to, oh, it's Rachel's turn now? Yes.
Thanks, Laura. So before we get into the tips themselves, I just want to give a brief overview of what we've heard from advisors and other constituents. But as we said, this this webinar was inspired by our experiences specifically with advisors. So what advisors have said to us, what we've heard them say. Students are not always sent to advising when they need to be. So that can go both ways. It means that the students are not being sent to advising in the first place. They're being sent somewhere else when they should be sent to advising, or they're being sent to advising when they really needed to be somewhere else. And this can apply, again, to many areas. We need more robust line management features. So the lines are growing and growing, and the options and resources that the staff have at their disposal are not enough or don't seem like they're enough to really manage that wait line. Caseloads are more trouble than they're worth. We're going to talk a little bit about that further on. Caseloads are being used in a variety in a lot of advising centers and a variety of other areas at colleges and universities. On the surface, it seems like a really great way to manage the workload, but it comes with some problems on its own, particularly when it comes to wait lines. We spend too much time redirecting students. Again, that's that idea that time is spent managing the students who come to us instead of working with them productively. So what happens when that triaging doesn't happen? They're getting frustrated. Our students are getting frustrated. Their tasks are not getting completed. They're less likely to persist, so we're less likely to engage them. We're less likely to retain them. Meanwhile, that line just keeps getting bigger. And as we've said, these tips don't just have to be used by advising centers. Other areas can benefit from them as well. One-stop shops, Laura mentioned those a couple minutes ago. One-stop shops are becoming increasingly popular at colleges around the country, if you're not familiar with them. They are usually areas where a lot of different services, such as advising, registration, financial aid, are all put into one centralized location. So there's usually one central entrance and maybe a central sign-in station or sign-in area, but there is not one waiting line. There are many different waiting lines, and that can create confusion in an area that is meant to make life a little easier for students. Admissions, they perform a role similar to advising in that they are working with a large number of students, and usually they have specific times of year when they tend to have the most traffic. And of course, any area which requires a line. My background personally is in learning center management, and there were times when we did have long lines and we didn't have tools that we felt we could use to make them shorter. We just felt like we had to go with the flow. So I'm going to hand things over to Laura. She's going to give you a little bit more information, and we're going to go right into the tips.
Hello again. So again, these tips that we're offering to you today are based on our own experiences when we visit the many colleges and universities that we have the pleasure of working with. Also, the tips that we're going to give you can be used with homegrown methods or other systems. It is always our goal when we are helping colleges and universities to look for solutions that will not involve having a budget for it, because your budgets are very, very tight right now. So it's our job to look at all of the tools that you have available to you and make the use of everything that you have instead of just saying, let's go buy something else. With that said, there will be times in the presentation that we will show you what we have done in our own product named QCampus, which is a tracking, engagement, and retention solution so that you can see how it works in there. So we absolutely adore working with higher educational professionals, and our hope is that you will give us feedback after this webinar on, have you used the tips that we've mentioned? If not, are you thinking of putting them into use? And if you do, how did that go? Please, please give us your feedback. And on the webinar itself. So tip number 1. The first thing that we suggest is to find ways to empower your students to triage themselves. So while they're standing there in line, why not help them to understand why they're in your line. Should they be in your line? Could they be doing something else? Could they get the help they need from somewhere else? So we feel if we can empower the students while they're standing there, then you'll have a shorter line and better results. One of the ways that we have suggested to many of the people that we've assisted is to post QR codes and or flow charts in the line. So where the students are standing and make this information available to them. I want to take a minute to explain what a QR code is. This is really great technology now because almost all of the students who have a cell phone are able to, without downloading anything, scan a QR code. That QR code will take them either to a web page or an app or some other information that the college and university can build out. If you don't want to do a QR code, you can do a flow chart. And with flow charts, what you want to help with is that sometimes whether or not a student should be in your line or the registration line or the admissions line or financial aid is sometimes very, very confusing to a student. So using a flow chart and even updating these flow charts depending on the time of year, you can help the students decide, maybe I shouldn't be here, or if I'm going to stand in this line for this long to get this help, what are some of the things I better have prepared before I actually sit down with an advisor or counselor? A good example would be when colleges and universities run those algorithms and decides that these are the students who haven't paid and this was the last day to pay. And overnight it goes through and drops all the students' courses for those students who paid. You'll send out an email, but 9 out of 10 times the student hasn't read the email, and for some reason they think they need to come to advising to get help with that when really they should be in the financial aid line. So putting that flow chart or QR code in the line that can help them understand that if you're in this line because your classes dropped this morning, please consider visiting financial aid to determine what your funding is like right now, or the bursar to actually make a payment. So that's a good example. Another tip we have when you start posting signs, something that we see very often when we go on campuses, are the signs start sounding very negative. We won't help you unless you have an ID, or things of that nature. Go look at everything that you're posting and these new things that you might be posting and make sure that they're positive. What we've seen happen is if we let the energy of your line degrade, this is when we see those awful experiences where the student is actually not very friendly to all of your workers. So we want to try to keep it as positive as possible, and one way to do that is to keep friendly, positive language in anything that you're posting. Another idea is to post a general email for the students to send information about themselves while they're standing in line. The main reason that I'm suggesting this is because if the student is, first of all, not on their social media while they're standing in line, which means their mind is completely off of why they came to see you, then they're struggling to put their words together when they are in front of you. If you give them the opportunity or encourage them to email this general email with why they're here to see you, it helps them start to formulate what it is that they need. And sometimes the light bulb comes on and they realize, well, I don't need to talk to my advisor about that. I just need to go to the portal and re-register for the courses and go down to the bursar and pay. So that's part of the reason, the main reason to offer the email, but also another great thing is when that email is available to all of your advisors or counselors, they can actually find the email when they're sitting with the student or preview them, and then reply to that email with all of the things that you're telling the student, especially if you do not have a system in place already that says, all right, I know you sat down with me to talk about your classes, but you're changing your mind on your major again, and I really want you to go to the career services first. You can say it to them and you can tell them that it's in Building H. Whether or not they actually retain that information when they walk away, slim to none. So if you have an email open and you're saying, it's located here, ask for Susan, all of those things that you're empowering them with. Also, it kind of documents what you're saying to them, and then depending on where you put your notes about the interaction, it could be a cut and paste, so it should save you time. Some of you do have systems, retention systems that let you make notes like that. as long as that note can be shown to the student, it's a good idea as well. But for those of you who have not made that investment, general email will help. All right, so the other interesting thing that we suggest to the schools that we're helping is to reach out using social media, but also this other thing that because you probably heard this many times, have a Facebook page, Twitter. They're great, and Twitter especially can help you change the mood of the line. You can tweet, oh, we know the line's out the door, we're working as fast as we can, we appreciate your patience, or did you know that by 3 p.m. this line will be almost non-existent, consider coming back, things like that. But the other types of apps out there that you might be interested in are apps that we refer to as proximity broadcast or proximity chat. And what the developers that have made these allow people to broadcast comments anonymously in a small area. Almost every time that Rachel and I visited a college or university, back when this app was called Yik Yak, I would hop on Yik Yak and start to get a feeling of what the energy was on that campus. What are the students talking about? 70% of what the students talk about is absolutely unrelated to academics, but there was a good amount of it that, keep in mind, they're posting anonymously. They were saying things like, oh, goodness, the line at advising is out the door again. This is the 4th time I've stood in this line. Does anyone know what the Wi-Fi password here is? So all of these things that they're talking to each other about anonymously in your area, if you have someone who has that app, you can get in there and kind of get a feel for what's going on and change that mood if it's negative. This is a suggestion that only a few of our customers have actually tried. So if you try this or you want more information, please reach out to me and I would love to know how this worked for you. So when we take the time to empower the student while they're standing there in line with some more information and keep their mind on why they want to talk to you in the first place, the hope is that they will actually realize that they don't need to be in your line either at all or just at that moment, and that is going to free up time for you and cut down on the frustration.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Let's move on to tip number 2. This is getting students to the right place before they get in line. So ideally, the student, if they don't need to be in your line, never gets in the line at all. Pretty much impossible to eliminate 100%, but there are some ways that we can try to cut down on that a little bit. So what you're seeing here is a mock-up of a landing page on a website, on your college's website, actually. So let's take a closer look at this just briefly. So notice the links here. So this landing page is not meant to be a directory. It is not meant to be an FAQ. You would still want to have, obviously, at least your directory. But a lot of areas maintain their own FAQs as well. But if you can get your web services to let you have a page that that many areas are able to access and provide information about. So these phrases here, you'll notice that a lot of them begin with the words "I need." And that is because when Laura and I worked in higher education, then when we continued on to Engineerica and started working with higher education clients, one thing that we notice is that when students say they need something, they phrase it in usually very specific ways. Sometimes these ways are unique to each college, depending on that, the college's practices. But they tend to say things like, I need help passing my class. I need help with advising. I need help paying for school. These things are things that students obviously need, but they have a hard time articulating exactly what specific aspect of these things they need help with. And we, as a result, have a difficult time redirecting them because they don't know our language and they might not have access to the stuff that we have that can help them. So this can really be a good way to start redirecting them to the right place before they get in line. So how do you make students aware of your landing page? So let's talk a little bit about that. So again, probably we would encourage you to promote it through those QR codes that we just mentioned, maybe posted around campus in the form of flyers, digital mailers, however your students are accessing information digitally, if they're doing it via email, if they tend to do it via an app, if they tend to just go to the website, whatever the culture on your campus is, whatever your students are most likely to see, that is where we would encourage you to post information that says go to this landing page and find what you need more easily. Again, you're triaging through phrases that students recognize. You're not saying, well, do you have an SAP appeal? Did your GPA drop below this? Things that students may or may not immediately recognize. So we're trying to use language that they understand and then help them go from there. And different services and locations should fall under each link. So for example, I need help passing my class. Immediately that probably for a lot of you brings to mind tutoring. But that might not be what the student means. They might mean that they need a note taker if they have a documented disability. It might mean that they just need a place to study. It might mean that they need help connecting with their instructor. So we want these to be phrases students recognize, but we also want them to be general enough that it can lead them to a lot of different places, and it's not so specific that they don't understand it. So let's take a look at how we do that in QCampus. What we did with QCampus is we made it easy to build. All you have to do is fill out a few text boxes. So let me just move over to that right here. So the Campus Compass is accessible to all students in QCampus. They can access it through the browser or through an app for iPhone and Android devices. It looks a lot better on the app. So the categories, again, you'll see very similar language to what you just saw on the presentation. But what I want to draw your attention to is this category here. I need help registering for courses. So say a student is thinking, I need to register for courses. It's time to register. I'm getting all these emails that say it's time to register for fall. I need to register. So our instinct might be to send them to advising in that regard, but by helping them go through this landing page or this compass, we can narrow it down a bit further. So the student sees these services that are available and they realize, okay, it's not course selection. I know what classes I need to take. I actually need to register for my courses. I just need help figuring that out. So they click or they tap on that, and then they're taken to a list of all the locations. And if you have this in a landing page, then each area would just maintain its own information, because we know that information tends to change, phone numbers, managers, physical locations. So you don't have to worry if you're directing students to a landing page or to the compass. You don't have to worry about being up to date with that information, because everybody is just making sure that they provide the latest information and you don't have to have it at your fingertips. So that's the benefit of moving that online. So when they see, okay, I don't even need to go to advising, I can go to registration or to the one stop, and look at that, they could make an appointment. If the area offers an appointment in QCampus, we can link them to it right there. They can also visit the website, they could send an email, and if they're on their phone, if they're in their app, then they can just tap on the map here and be taken to turn-by-turn walking directions, which is of course especially useful if you have a large campus. Most of us who work at colleges, we don't tend to spend time in every single building on campus on a regular basis, so we might not know exactly how to give the student the correct directions, and the student is certainly going to struggle with that, especially if they haven't been with the school for very long. So I'm going to hand things over to Laura for our next tip.
Thanks, Rachel. Next tip number 3, is to expand the use of referrals. Most of the time when we come to campuses, we find that there is some sort of referral system, early alert system being used. And it's not always one of the expensive solutions that are out there. It is sometimes just paper and pencil. So one of the very, very first things that we do when we start helping with this particular feature is to encourage you all to name them something other than referrals. Students coming out of high school still relate to the word referral as something that's negative. They're not doing well, they're in trouble. So we encourage you all to use the word action items or any other positive word that you come up with I like action items. Rachel and I like it because we kind of look at each student as a project, and the project goal is to have them persist and graduate. So these really are action items that they need to accomplish. It doesn't really matter whether or not it's that they're not doing well in the course. They just need to get these things done in order to be successful. So it might be using tutoring, but it also might be making sure they visit their advisor before the last minute of drop and add, and visit the advisor maybe twice in the semester. It might be that they really should probably join a club or any other thing that is individually to the student important for their success. So it becomes project management. With that in mind, make sure that all of your action items, I'm going to call them that from here on out, but in your case they may be referrals, that they are clear and actionable instructions with a timeline. Most of the time, we see instructions that are clear. For some reason, a lot of times, the location to go to get this thing done is not included. I know from experience that sometimes that's due to the fact that things change so often on campuses that you hate to commit, but let's make sure that they know exactly where to go, even if it isn't something that is on a campus, and that the information is actionable. So the timeline also helps tremendously. They need to know if this is something that they should get done in the next 24 hours or it can be done later in the semester. Now, a lot of the action items that we see are very convoluted when you look at them as a whole. So we encourage you to split up the process. When you think of something like an appeal for a standard of academic progress, I don't know of any college or university that's a one-step deal. There are many, many things that you have to have the student provide and reach out to these other people and get approvals and whatnot in order to go through that entire process. We want the action item to be split up into little pieces, again, like project management, so that you don't find yourself in that situation where the student runs off to get the first thing you told them to do, and now they're back in your line to ask you, okay, what do I do next? So we're hoping that that will be helpful. Then when you are asking the student to run off and go get something done and bring something back or whatever it is, let's make sure that that task is very easy to check off. We have found many times that there's traditions still stuck in some of these processes that are no longer applicable. So take a long look at what it is you're asking the student to do in some of these more convoluted processes and take out the things that you just don't need anymore. If a signature or approval from a professor can be done through email, let's do that rather than send the student off looking for this professor that often is adjunct and not always in the office, because that's just going to delay this whole process for you and what you're trying to get done for the student. Also, please think about avoiding the limits on who can make referrals. Almost every time that we show up on a campus, the referrals or action items are being generated by professors. That's a great idea. However, there are many, many other things that a student needs to accomplish and obstacles that they need to overcome that have nothing to do with how they're doing in the course and can happen long before they ever sit down in a course. So is their finances in order? Are all of the admissions records in order? Did they recover from a low GPA and now they're back in good standing? All of these things happen before they ever get to class, and they can be just as much of a barrier to their persistence as not doing well in the class. So open up your creation of these tickets to everyone. We even have a school that allows students and parents to initiate action items. Obviously, the kind of action item that a student can see to initiate for another student is on certain topics, like maybe that the student doesn't seem to, their friend doesn't seem to be doing well with adjusting to being away from home, or they are missing a lot of class. The professor's not noticing this because there's 300 students in the class. For parents, it could be those same type of topics. Obviously, you're not going to open up an action item to a parent that says, I think this student should go to the Career Center and do an inventory test. So we have seen many places open that ability to create and nudge a student into the direction that they need help, and it's open to almost everyone. And at the end of all this, try to make that referral or action item as personal as possible. A lot of times, these action items that we see are just checklists. And there's a reason for that. The people that, often the professors that are creating these items, they do need it to be simple and quick. However, if you open this up to everyone, not every item has to look like that. If I'm the advisor, asking the student to go to Career Center to do that inventory test on their personality, because it's not so much that they're not doing well in chemistry, we just don't think that that's the right major for them. I want a way to empower them with some more words once they get to the Career Center, and as well let the Career Center know why that student's coming. You know, why did you send this student to me? What is it we're supposed to do? So personalize it and help the students, empower them with this language that we use in higher ed, so that once they do get to where they need to go, they can speak more clearly about what it is they need. And keep tracking in mind, we always see these referral systems, early alert systems, retention systems, we see that they launch really well and that all of these things are happening, but no one has any idea at the end of it. So in other words, if I told the student to go to career, how do I know they actually got there? How does career know they're coming? It's real important. Like, just think about when you're doing the advising, what if you find out that 200 students were told to come to advising this week because of some help they needed, and you already have a load? So seeing who's being sent to you, seeing whether or not the student that you sent somewhere else and redirected got there is extremely important. If you don't have that, you'll lose your motivation on the front end of the initiative. So I think next we're going to take a look at QCampus, how we did an action, what we call an action plan in our system, and we kept all of those things in mind. So sorry, Rachel. First thing we want to look at is just a general plan for a student. And again, keep that project management in mind when we look at this. The examples here are career and advising, but they can be anything. If you think that student needs to be part of a club, if you think that student needs to use the tutoring that's offered in their housing, if you think the student needs to use Khan Academy for their biology class, the creation of the action items is based on absolutely all of the services, all of them available at your university or college. So again, on this example, we have a student who has been told to go to the Career Center and do a My Plan account. There's these wonderful web services out there that help students go through their career stuff. And you can see that that was completed 2 minutes ago. So if that was something that I had given the student to do, I can see it's done. I don't even have to open it and look at it. It's done. Then we see that they were also told to do a career personality test. Now, that's not completed yet, but it's due in 14 days, which is nice because career things can wait a little bit further into the semester. And then we see that there was an academic hold assistance that was recommended to them, and it's past due. So quickly we can see where the student stands with all of the people that they're making a connection with on campus. Now let's take a little closer look into that. Give Rachel just a second. Okay. Heading to action items. Here are more examples of the action items that someone would see when they log in and look for it. And I'm going to try to help this student out. I'm going to go ahead and assign this to them. Let's go for that change of major. And let's see what that looks like when we assign. It's okay. That's a creation of it. So when we assign this action item to them, the description tells them everything that they need to know. And then further down, we can put the student name in. We don't have to do that now. But we can also say auto-complete this based on rules. So if the student goes to the Career Center and does this test and they sign in for it, it will auto-complete. So the Career Center doesn't have to turn around and try to tell you that they made it. You don't have to try to look and call them or run reports to see that they made it. The system lets you know they made it. Further down there's notes. That's where our suggestion to make it more personal. Put whatever notes you want in there. Sometimes your notes are only to the person you're sending them to, so you can uncheck the public for student. Sometimes, most of the time, you want the student to see it. You have some followers, and off it goes. So now what you would be looking at when you're using action items in our product is a very comprehensive closing of the loop without causing you a lot of housekeeping, record-keeping tasks.
Tip number 4 is make your wait line as virtual as possible. And we all we all like the idea, or many people like the idea of making the wait lines more virtual. But oftentimes we hear, well, we don't have the resources for that. We don't have the money. We don't have the time. So we've come up with some ideas that we think are pretty doable for most areas. So obviously, we advocate for this because eliminating physical wait line as much as possible, it frees up your physical space, which we know is at a premium. It makes waiting easier and more practical for students, and it shows that you respect students' time. And I want to mention that because that's something that I actually struggled with myself. I know that and this is a no-brainer, we only know ourselves. We only know how busy we are, how packed our schedules are. So it can become very easy, and this is in any industry, to not realize that our clients, our customers, our students, they are just as busy as we are. They have as many responsibilities as we do. So the more that we can show we respect their time, we're going to try to save them as much time as possible, the better relationship we're going to build with them. Making your wait line more virtual is going to help to turn your area into more of a lounge and not a line. And of course, the difference is a lounge is a productive area where people are going to go, they're going to get some tasks done. A line is where they have to stand and wait, and nothing is really getting done except they might be moving closer towards getting something done. One simple thing that you might be able to do is to text students when it's their turn, or offer to have them check in and give them an approximate wait time so they can come back, sort of like what a restaurant does. They then can go and complete other tasks and then come back and just be seen at that time. Now, there are free or low-cost programs that do exist, software programs that can help with wait lines and appointments. They can have students sign into a queue. They can have students make appointments online. Generally, though, you want to be careful because they generally require a lot of manual input of information. So what that means is that there's no communication with your SIS, so you're relying on students to give you accurate information rather than them choosing from the information that we already know is accurate. So then the data is not going to be as clear, and you're going to have a harder time preparing for the data is not going to be as accurate, and you're going to have a harder time preparing for their arrival. They also lack tracking. So we've talked about how tracking is really important. We know that tracking is important. We know that it's becoming increasingly important, even if you work in an area that is not explicitly being asked to track information about student visits. You never know when that's going to come up, and you never know when that information could come in handy when it comes to things like asking for a larger budget or more resources. So what I want to do is show you how we do this in QCampus, because if your school has QCampus, then it's already built in for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to log out, because right now I'm logged in as an admin, so I have a lot of different things that I can do, but I want to log in as a student and show you what it looks like from their perspective. So when a student logs in to QCampus, when they sign into a sign-in station that is attached to a wait line, we can automatically generate messages to them that give them an idea of what their wait time is going to be and that tell them when they're ready to be seen. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So yesterday I had a student sign in to a wait line, a fake student. So I was the student. And she started to receive some important information. So I'm going to show you the information that came in for her. So if you look at the right side of the screen right here under My Notifications, you can see that she received 2 notifications. The first notification said that she was added to the wait line. It tells her how many people are ahead of her. It tells her what location she was added to the wait line for. It gives her an idea of how long she might have to wait for a time. So that gives her the opportunity to leave, take care of some other business, or wait and do something productive and come back instead of standing in a very long line wondering when she's going to be seen. Then when she was next, when the last student that was in front of her was signed in, she received another notification that said that we're almost ready for you. Please start making your way over to us and we're going to call your name when we are ready to see you, which should be very, very soon. It's important to note with these notifications, as I mentioned, they were sent automatically. I didn't sign her in and then go in and message her. She didn't sign in if she were a real student, and then I had to go in and message her. These were generated automatically based on triggers that we've already set up behind the scenes. And when you have QCampus, Laura and I do that setup for you. We consult with you on what you want them to say, but we do that back of the house setup for you. So that's the first thing that's important. The second thing is she doesn't have to actually log into QCampus to view these notifications. That's why she hasn't read them in QCampus yet, because she received them as a text message, or she received them as a push notification, or she received them as an email. So you have a lot of different ways. And again, what we've talked about before, every school is different in what their student populations tend to connect the most with in terms of communication methods. So we work with you to make sure that you're reaching out to students in a way that makes the most sense for them, and that you have to do as little manual reach out as humanly possible.
All right, let's go on to tip number 5. This is our last tip, and we saved it for the end because the tip basically is, please rethink the use of your caseloads. So the initial idea of creating caseloads for counselors or advisors is that it will balance out the load and create a relationship with the student because they're coming back to the same person all the time. It helps you all keep your head wrapped around what it is they're trying to do and not having to pull folders or look at notes from who they met with last to try to figure out why they're here again. So that's the idea. Good reasons. These are good reasons to have caseloads. However, our suggestion and our tip is to maybe not do them. So first of all, they're difficult to create, they're difficult to manage, and especially so if there is not a comprehensive tracking system. The reason for this is that when these caseloads become unbalanced, or even more crucial, when there's the perception that they're no longer balanced, it can cause quite a bit of havoc among your advisors because they feel like, well, why does this one advisor have all this huge load and this other one doesn't, and what's going on? Without tracking that you can actually show the advisors exactly what's going on as far as traffic, the perception can be just as damaging as the balance itself. When you find that it's no longer balanced and you have to start moving students, this creates a lot of confusion for them, so it defeats that idea of keeping that relationship and whatnot. And furthermore, caseloads do not prevent the one thing that we think is most detrimental to your workload, and that is that working in higher ed, much like a tax season, there are certain times that no matter what, the lines are going to be long, the number of students that you're trying to work with is going to be much higher than at other times. Caseloads do not prevent this problem. So it's great that you only have X number of students that you're working with, but that X number of students could all show up 2 days before drop an ad. So that didn't help you. You're still in the same problem. So our advice is to rethink it, be very vocal if this is something that your advising center is looking at, because if you don't have the tracking, you'll not be able to avoid some of these pitfalls. In QCampus, because we're tracking, number one, we also are able to provide to you some amazing reports so that you can avoid this. Even if you don't use caseloads, you can avoid some of these issues. So the first report I want to show you is a report that we refer to as a chart visit report. So here we're looking at the traffic in your area. And again, this can be for one-stop shops, this can be for admissions, this can be for registration, financial aid, advising, counseling. Let's take a look at what the volume really is so that we can kind of dispel those perceptions that may be incorrect. So we can see how many students are coming every day, how long they stay, how many students are coming every week. There's also a report not included in this one here that will tell you how long they waited. Everything you need to know to see how are we handling the volume of students and can we spread this out a little bit. Most of the time when we see caseloads, the students are divvied up according to their major. So we have another report that will show you your visits based on your majors. This way you can tell, is it true that your management students are in the advising center or counseling center more often than any other student? And if that's true, then what do we need to do about the number of employees available to them? So this is another wonderful way to find out, are we actually having an issue with the balance in caseloads, and can we do something about it? Another thing in QCampus, just to throw in, is that caseloads are handled quite automatically. So when a student wants to make an appointment, the only appointments they see open is for that advisor that they're assigned to. All right, back to you, Rachel.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. We do want to encourage you to reach out to us. So those are our email addresses right there. And again, we just want to know what triage strategies do you already have? What questions do you have? These tips are pretty general. They are based on the culmination of our experiences, but you might have a really unique situation and you might need some advice on how to tackle that. So we really love to speak to higher education professionals. It's our passion. It's what we do. So please feel free to reach out to us about that. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate your time. Have a great semester. And again, we hope to have you guys reach out to us and speak to you soon. Bye-bye.